Part 3. Transit. 2003. Ukrainian Maternity Hospital Number 6. The BBC has spoken to mothers from the city of Kharkiv who say they gave birth to healthy babies, only to have them taken by maternity staff. In 2003, the authorities agreed to exhume about 30 bodies from a cemetery used by Maternity Hospital Number 6. One campaigner was allowed into the autopsy room to gather video evidence. She has given that footage to BBC and the Council of Europe. In its report, the Council describes a general culture of trafficking of children snatched at birth, and a wall of silence from hospital staff upward over their fate. The pictures show organs, including brains, have been stripped, and some bodies dismembered. A senior British forensic pathologist says he is very concerned to see the bodies in pieces, as that is not standard postmortem practice. It could possibly be a result of harvesting stem cells from bone marrow. Hospital Number 6 denies the allegations. Story by Matthew Hill, BBC Health correspondent from BBC News at bbc.com. 21. Lev. Ain't no one gonna tell you what's in your heart, he tells Lev. You gotta find that out for yourself. Lev and his new travel companion walk along train tracks, surrounded by thick, brushy terrain. You got it in your heart to run from unwinding? Ain't no one can tell you it's the wrong thing to do, even if it is against the law. The good Lord wouldn't have put it in your heart if it wasn't right. You listening, Fry? 'Cause this here's wisdom. Wisdom you can take to the grave and then dig up again when you need some solace. Solace, that means comfort. I know what solace means, says Lev, peeved by the mention of the good Lord, who hasn't done much for Lev lately except confuse things. The kid is 15, and his name is Cyrus Finch, although he doesn't go by that name. No one calls me Cyrus, he told Lev shortly after they met. I go by Sci-Fi. And since Sci-Fi is partial to nicknames, he calls Lev Fry, short for small fry. Since it has the same number of letters as Lev, he says it's appropriate. Lev doesn't want to burst his bubble by pointing out that his full name is Levi. Sci-Fi enjoys hearing himself talk. I make my own roads in life, he tells Lev. That's how come we're traveling the rails instead of some dumb old country road. Sci-Fi is Umber. They used to call us black, can you imagine? Then there was this artist dude, mixed race himself. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. He got famous, though, for painting people of African ancestry in the deep south. The color he used most was umber. People liked that a whole lot better, so it stuck. Bet you didn't know where that word came from, did you, Fry? Following right along, they started calling so-called white people sienna, after another paint color. Better words. Didn't have no value judgment to 'em. Of course, it's not like racism is gone completely, but as my dads like to say, the veneer of civilization got itself a second coat. You like that, Fry? The veneer of civilization. He slowly sweeps his hand in the air as he says it, like he's feeling the fine finish on a table. My dads are always saying stuff like that. Sci-Fi's a runaway, although he claims not to be. I ain't no runaway. I'm a run too, he had told Lev when they first met, although he won't tell Lev where he's running to. When Lev asked, Sci-Fi shook his head and said, Information shall be given on a need-to-know basis. Well, he can keep his secret, because Lev doesn't care where he's going. The simple fact that he has a destination is enough for Lev. It's more than Lev has. Destination implies a future. If this umber-skinned boy can lend Lev that much, it's worth it to travel with him. They had met at a mall. Hunger had driven Lev there. He had hidden in dark, lonely places for almost 2 days after he lost Connor and Risa. With no experience being a street rat, Lev went hungry. But eventually, hunger turns anyone into a master of survival. The mall was a mecca for a newborn street rat. The food court was full of amazingly wasteful people. The trick, Lev discovered, was to find people who bought more food than they could possibly eat, and then wait until they were done. About half the time, they just left it on the table. Those were the ones Lev went after, because he might have been hungry enough to eat table scraps, but he was still too proud to rifle through the trash. While Lev was finishing off some cheerleader's pizza, he heard a voice in his ear. You ain't gotta be eating other folks' garbage, fool! Lev froze, certain it was a security guard ready to haul him away, but it was only this tall umber kid with a funny grin, wearing attitude like it was a cologne. Let me show you how it's done. Then he went to a pretty girl who was working at Wicked Walk Chinese food concession, flirted with her for a few minutes, then left with nothing. No food, no drink, nothing. I think I'll stick to leftovers, Lev had told him. Patience, my man. See, it's getting on toward closing time. All these places, by law, gotta get rid of all the food they made today. They can't keep it and reuse it tomorrow. So where do you think that food goes? I'll tell you where it goes. It goes home with the last shift. But the people who work these places ain't gonna eat the stuff on account of they sick to death of it. See that girl I was talking to? She likes me. I told her I worked at Shusterman downstairs and could get her some overstock, maybe. Do you work there? No! Are you even listening to me? So anywho, right before closing, I'm gonna get myself over to Wicked Walk again. I'll give her a smile and I'll be all like, hey, what you gonna do with all that leftover food? And she'll be all like, what you got in mind? And 5 minutes later, I'm walking away in orange chicken heaven with enough to feed an army. And sure enough, it happened exactly like he said it would. Lev was amazed. Stick with me, Sci-Fi had said, putting his fist in the air. And God is my witness, you will never go hungry again. Then he added, that's from Gone with the Wind. I know, said Lev, which in fact he didn't. Lev had agreed to go with him because he knew the two filled a need in each other. Sci-Fi was like a preacher with no flock. He couldn't exist without an audience. And Lev needed someone who could fill his head with ideas, to replace the lifetime of ideas that had been taken from him. A day later, Lev's shoes are worn and his muscles are sore. The memory of Risa and Connor is still a fresh wound, and it doesn't want to heal. Chances are they were caught. Chances are they've been unwound. All because of him. Does that make him an accomplice to murder? How could it, when unwinds aren't really dead? He doesn't know whose voice is in his head anymore. His father's, Pastor Dan's. It just makes him angry. He'd rather hear Sci-Fi's voice outside of his head than whatever voices were inside. The terrain around them hasn't changed much since they left town. Eye-high shrubs and a smattering of trees. Some of the growth is evergreen, some of it yellow, turning brown. Weeds grow up between the train tracks, but not too tall. Any weed dumb enough to grow tall ain't got no chance. It gets decapitated by the next train that comes through. Decapitated, that means head cut off. I know what decapitated means, and you can stop talking that way, all double negatives and stuff. Sci-Fi stops right there in the middle of the railroad tracks and stares at Lev like he's trying to melt him with his eyes. You got a problem with the way I talk? You got a problem with an old world umber patois? I do, and it's fake. What you talk about, foo? It's obvious. All but people never even said things like foo except on dumb pre-war TV shows and stuff. You're speaking wrong on purpose. Wrong? What makes it wrong? It's classic. Just like those TV shows. And I ain't appreciating you disrespecting my patois. Patois means, I know what it means, Lev says, even though he isn't entirely sure. I ain't stupid. Sci-Fi puts up an accusing finger like a lawyer. Aha! You said ain't. Now who's talking wrong? That doesn't count. I said it because it's all I hear from you. After a while, I can't help but sound like you. At that, Sci-Fi grins. Yeah, he says, ain't that the truth? Old world umber is contagious. It's dominant. And talking the talk don't make a person dumb. I have you know, I got the highest reading and writing scores at my school, Fry. But I gotta respect my ancestors and all they went through so I could be here. Sure, I could talk like you, but I choose not to. It's like art, you know? Picasso had to prove to the world he can paint the right way before he goes putting both eyes on one side of the face and noses sticking out of kneecaps and stuff. See, you paint wrong because that's the best you can do. You just a chump. But you do it because you want to? Then you're an artist. He smiles at Lev. That's a bit of sci-fi wisdom right there, Fry. You can take that to the grave and dig it up when you need it. Sci-Fi turns and spits out a piece of gum that hits a train rail and sticks there. Then he shoves another piece in his mouth. Anyway, my dad's got no problem with it, and they're Lily Sienna like you. They? Sci had said dads before, but Lev had figured it was just some more old umber slang. Yeah, Sci-Fi with a shrug. I got two. Ain't no thing. Lev tries his best to process this. Of course he's heard of male parenting, or yin families, as they're currently called, but in the sheltered structure of his life, such things always belong to an alternate universe. Sci-Fi, however, doesn't even catch Lev's surprise. He's still on his brag jag. Yeah, I got myself an IQ of 155. Did you know that, Fry? Of course not. How would you know? Then he hesitates. It went down a few points, though, on account of the accident. I was on my bike and got hit by some damn fool in a Mercedes. He points to the scar on the side of his head. What a mess. Splattered, you know. I was nearly roadkill. It turned my right temporal lobe into jello. He shivers as he thinks about it, then shrugs. But brain damage ain't a problem like it used to be. They just replaced the brain tissue and you're good as new. My dad's even paid off the surgeon so I'd get an entire temporal lobe from an Unwind, no offense, rather than getting a bunch of brain bits like people are supposed to get. Lev knows about that. His sister Kara had epilepsy, so they replaced a small part of her brain with 100 tiny brain bits. It took care of the problem, and she didn't seem any worse for it. It had never occurred to Lev where those tiny pieces of brain tissue might have come from. See, brain bits work okay, but they don't work great, Sci-Fi explains. It's like putting spackle over a hole in the wall. No matter how well you do it, that wall ain't never going to be as good. So my dad's made sure I got an entire temporal lobe from a single donor. But that kid wasn't as smart as me. He was no dummy, but he didn't have the 155. The last brain scan put me at 130. That's in the top 5% of the population, and still considered genius. Just not with a capital G. What's your IQ? He asked Lev. Are you a dim bulb, or are you high wattage? Lev sighs. I don't know. My parents don't believe in intelligence scans. It's kind of a religious thing. Everyone's equal in God's eyes and all that. Oh, you come from one of those families. Sci-Fi takes a good look at him. So if they all high and mighty, why are they unwinding you? Although Lev doesn't want to get into it, he figures Sci-Fi is his only friend that he's got. Might as well tell him the truth. I'm a tithe. Sci-Fi looks at him with eyes all wide, like Lev just told him he was God himself. Damn, so you are holy and stuff. Not anymore. Sci-Fi nods and purses his lips, saying nothing for a while. They walk along the tracks. The railroad ties changed from wood to stone, and the gravel on the side of the tracks now seems better maintained. We just crossed the state line, Sci-Fi says. Lev would ask him which state they've crossed into, but he doesn't want to sound stupid. Any spot where multiple tracks merge or diverge, there's a little 2-story shack standing there like a displaced lighthouse, a railroad switch house. There are plenty of them along this stretch of line, and these are the places Lev and Sci-Fi find shelter each night. Aren't you afraid someone from the railroads will find us here? Lev asks as they approach one of the sorry-looking structures. Nah, they ain't used anymore, Sci-Fi tells him. The whole system's automated, been that way for years. But now it costs too much to tear all those switch houses down. Guess they figure nature will eventually tear them down for free. The switch house is padlocked, but a padlock is only as strong as the door it's on, and this door has been routed by termites. A single kick rips the padlock hasp from the wood, and the door flies inward to a shower of dust and dead spiders. Upstairs is an 8x8 room, windows on all 4 sides. It's freezing. Sci-Fi has an expensive-looking winter coat that keeps him warm at night. Lev only has a puffy, fiber-filled jacket that he stole from a chair at the mall the other day. Sci-Fi had turned his nose up when he saw Lev take that jacket just before they left the mall. Stealin's for lowlifes, Sci had said. If you got class, you don't steal what you need. You get other people to give it to you of their own free will, just like I did back at that Chinese place. It's all about being smart and smooth. You'll learn. Lev's stolen jacket is white, and he hates it. All his life he'd worn white, a pristine absence of color that defined him. But now there was no comfort in wearing it. They eat well that night, thanks to Lev, who finally had his own survivalist brainstorm. It involves small animals killed by passing trains. I ain't eating no track kill, Sci-Fi insisted when Lev had suggested it. Those things could have been rotting out here for weeks for all we know. No, Lev told him. Here's what we'll do. We'll walk a few miles down the tracks, marking each dead critter with a stick. Then, when the next train comes through, we'll backtrack. Anything we find that's not marked is fresh. Granted, it was a fairly disgusting idea on the surface, but it really was no different from hunting, if your weapon were a diesel engine. They build a small fire beside the switch house and dine on roast rabbit and armadillo, which doesn't taste as bad as Lev would have thought. In the end, meat is meat, and barbecue does for armadillo exactly what it does for steak. Smorgasbash, Sci-Fi decides to call this hunting method as they eat. That's what I call creative problem solving. Maybe you're a genius after all, Fry. It feels good to have Sci's approval. Hey, is today Thursday? Says Lev, just realizing. I think it's Thanksgiving. Well, Fry, we're alive. That's plenty to be thankful for. That night, up in the small room of the switch house, Sci-Fi asks the big question. Why'd your parents tithe you, Fry? One of the good things about being with Sci-Fi is that he talks about himself a lot. It keeps Lev from having to think about his own life. Except, of course, when Sci asks. Lev answers him with silence, pretending to be asleep. And if there's one thing he knows Sci-Fi can't stand, it's silence. So he fills it himself. Were you a storked baby? Is that it? They didn't want you in the first place and couldn't wait to get rid of you? Lev keeps his eyes closed and doesn't move. Well, I was storked, Sci says. My dad's got me on the doorstep the first day of summer. No big deal. They were ready to have a family anyway. In fact, they were so pleased, they finally made it official and got themselves married. Lev opens his eyes, curious enough to admit he's still awake. But after the Heartland War, didn't they make it illegal for men to get married? They didn't get married, they got married. What's the difference? Sci-Fi looks at him like he's a moron. The letter M. Anyway, in case you were wondering, I'm not like my dad's. My compass points to girls, if you know what I mean. Yeah, mine does too. What he doesn't tell Sci-Fi is that the closest thing he's ever been to a date or even kissing a girl was the slow dancing at his tithing party. The thought of the party brings a sudden and sharp jolt of anxiety that makes him want to scream, so he squeezes his eyes tight and forces that explosive feeling to go away. Everything from Lev's old life is like that now, a tickling time bomb in his head. Forget that life, he tells himself. You're not that boy anymore. What are your parents like? Sci-Fi asks. I hate them, Lev says, surprised that he said it, surprised that he means it. That's not what I asked. This time, Sci isn't taking silence for an answer, so Lev tells him as best he can. My parents, he begins, do everything they're supposed to. They pay their taxes, they go to church, they vote the way their friends expect them to vote and think what they're supposed to think, and they send us to schools that raise us to think exactly like they do. Doesn't sound too terrible to me. It wasn't, says Lev, his discomfort building. But they loved God more than they love me, and I hate them for it. So I guess that means I'm going to hell. Tell you what, when you get there, save a room for me, okay? Why? What makes you think you're going there? I don't, but just in case, gotta plan your contingencies, right? 2 days later, they find themselves in the town of Scottsburg, Indiana. Well, at least Lev finally knows what state they're in. He wonders if maybe this is Sci-Fi's destination, but Sci hasn't said anything either way. They've left the railroad tracks, and Sci-Fi tells Lev they have to go south on county roads until they can find tracks heading in that direction. Sci hasn't been acting right. It began the night before. Something in his voice. Something in his eyes, too. At first, Lev thought it was his imagination, but now in the pale light of the autumn day, it's clear that Sci-Fi isn't himself. He's lagging behind Lev instead of leading. His stride is all off, more like a shuffle than a strut. It makes Lev anxious in a way he hasn't been since before he met Sci-Fi. Are you ever going to tell me where we're going? Lev asks, figuring that maybe they're close, and maybe that's why Sci's acting weird. Sci-Fi hesitates, weighing the wisdom of saying anything. Finally, he says, We're going to Joplin. That's in southwest Missouri, so we've still got a long way to go. In the back of his mind, Lev registers that Sci-Fi has completely dropped his old Umber way of talking. Now he sounds like any other kid Lev might have known back home. But there's also something dark and throaty about his voice now, too, vaguely menacing, like the voice of a werewolf before it turns. What's in Joplin? Lev asks. Nothing for you to worry about. But Lev is beginning to worry, because when Sci-Fi gets where he's going, Lev will be alone again. This journey was easier when he didn't know the destination. As they walk, Lev can tell Sci's mind is somewhere else. Maybe it's in Joplin. What could be there? Maybe a girlfriend moved there? Maybe he had tracked down his birth mother. Lev had worked up a dozen reasons for Sci-Fi to be on this trip, and there's probably a dozen more he hasn't even thought of. There's a main street in Scottsburg trying to be quaint, but just looking tired. It's late morning as they move through town. Restaurants are gearing up for the lunch crowd. So, are you going to use your charms to get us a free meal, or is it my turn to try? Lev asks. He turns to Sci, but he's not there. A quick scan of the shops behind him, and Lev sees a door swinging closed. It's a Christmas store, its windows all done up in green and red decorations, plastic reindeer, and cotton snow. Lev can't imagine Sai has gone in there, but when he peers in the window, there he is, looking around like a customer. With the weird way Sci-Fi has been acting, Lev has no choice but to go in as well. It's warm in the store, and it smells of artificial pine. It's the kind of scent they put on cardboard air fresheners. There are fully trimmed aluminum Christmas trees all around, displaying all sorts of holiday decorations, each tree with a different theme. At another time and place, Lev would have loved wandering through a store like this. A saleswoman eyes them suspiciously from behind the counter. Lev grabs Sai's shoulder. "Come on, let's get out of here." But Sai shakes him off and goes over to a tree that's decorated all in glittering gold. He seems mesmerized by the bulbs and tinsel. There's the slightest twitch right beneath his left eye. "Sai," whispers Lev, "come on, we have to get to Joplin, remember? Joplin." But Sai's not moving. The saleswoman comes over. She wears a holiday sweater and a holiday smile. "Can I help you find something?" "No," says Lev, "we're just leaving." "A nutcracker," says Sai. "I'm looking for a nutcracker from my mom." "Oh, they're on the back wall." The woman turns to look across the store, and the moment she does, Sai picks a dangling gold bauble from the glittering tree and slips it into his coat pocket. Lev just stands there, stunned. Sai doesn't even spare Lev a glance as he follows the woman to the back wall, where they discuss nutcrackers. There's a panic brewing deep down in Lev now, slowly fighting its way to the surface. Sai and the woman chat for a few moments more, then Sai thanks her and comes back to the front of the store. "I've got to get more money from home," he says in his not Sai voice. "I think my mom will like the blue one." "You don't have a mom," Lev wants to say, but he doesn't, because all that matters now is getting out of the shop. "All right then," says the saleswoman. "You have a nice day." Sai leaves, and Lev makes sure he's right behind him, just in case Sai suddenly has a phantom urge to go back into the store and take something else. Then, the moment the door closes behind them, Sci-Fi takes off. He doesn't just run, he ejects, like he's trying to burst out of his own skin. He bolts down the block, then into the street, then back again. Cars honk, a truck nearly mows him down. He darts in random directions like a balloon losing air, and then he disappears into an alley far down the street. This is not about a gold Christmas bulb. It can't be. It's a meltdown. It's a seizure, the nature of which Lev can't even begin to guess. I should just let him go, Lev thinks. Let him go and then run in the opposite direction and not look back. Lev could survive on his own now. He's gotten street smart enough. He could do it without Sci-Fi. But there was that look about Sai before he ran. Desperation. It was just like the look in Connor's face the moment he pulled Lev out of his father's comfortable sedan. Lev had turned on Connor. He will not turn on Sci-Fi. With a pace and stride far steadier than Sci-Fi's, Lev crosses the street and makes his way down the alley. "Sci-Fi," he calls, loud enough to be heard but not loud enough to draw attention. "Sci?" He glances in dumpsters and doorways. "Cyrus, where are you?" He comes to the end of the alley and looks left and right. No sign of him. Then, as he's about to lose hope, he hears, "Fry?" He turns his head and listens again. "Fry, over here." This time he can tell where it's coming from. A playground to his right. Green plastic and steel poles painted blue. There are no children playing. The only sign of life is the tip of Sci-Fi's shoe poking out from behind the slide. Lev crosses through a hedge, steps down into the sand that surrounds the playground, and circles the apparatus until Sci-Fi comes into view. Lev almost wants to back away from what he sees. Sai is curled, knees to chest, like a baby. The left side of his face is twitching, and his left hand quivers like gelatin. He grimaces as if he's in pain. "What is it? What's wrong? Tell me. Maybe I can help you." "Nothing," Sci-Fi hisses. "I'll be all right." But to Lev, he looks like he's dying. In his shaking left hand, Sci-Fi holds the ornament he stole. "I didn't steal this," he says. "Sci, I said I didn't steal this." He smashes the heel of his right hand against the side of his head. "It wasn't me." "Okay, whatever you say." Lev looks around to make sure they're unobserved. Sai quiets down a bit. "Cyrus Finch doesn't steal. Never did, never will. It's not my style." He says it, even as he looks at the evidence right there in his hand. But in a second, the evidence is gone. Sci raises his right fist and smashes it into his left palm, shattering the bulb. Gold glass tinkles to the ground. Blood begins to ooze from his left palm and right knuckles. Sci, your hand. Don't worry about that, he says. I want you to do something for me, Fry. Do it before I change my mind. Lev nods. See my coat over there? I want you to look in the pockets. Sci-Fi's heavy coat is a few yards away, tossed over the seat of a swing. Lev goes to the swing set and picks up the coat. He reaches into an inside pocket and finds, of all things, a gold cigarette lighter. He pulls it out. Is that it, Sci? You want a cigarette? If a cigarette would bring Sci-Fi out of this, Lev would be the first to light it for him. There are things far more illegal than cigarettes, anyway. Check the other pockets. Lev searches the other pockets for a pack of cigarettes, but there are none. Instead, he finds a small treasure trove. Jeweled earrings, watches, a gold necklace, a diamond bracelet, things that shimmer and shine even in the daylight. Sci, what did you do? I already told you it wasn't me. Now go take all that stuff and get rid of it. Get rid of it and don't let me see where you put it. Then he covers his eyes like it's a game of hide and seek. Go! Before he changes my mind! Lev pulls everything out of the pocket and, cradling it in his arms, runs to the far end of the playground. He digs in the cold sand and drops it all in, kicking sand back over it. When he's done, he smooths it over with the side of his shoe and drops a scattering of leaves above it. He goes back to Sci-Fi, who's sitting just like Lev had left him, hands over his face. It's done, Lev says. You can look now. When Sci takes his hands away, there's blood all over his face from the cuts on his hands. Sci stares at his hands, then looks at Lev helplessly like a kid who just got hurt in a playground. Lev half expects him to cry. You wait here, Lev says. I'll go get some bandages. He knows he'll have to steal them. He wonders what Pastor Dan would say about all the things he's been stealing lately. Thank you, Fry, Sci says. You did good, and I ain't gonna forget it. The old number lilt is back in his voice. The twitching has stopped. Sure thing, says Lev, with a comforting smile, and he heads off to find a pharmacy. What Sci-Fi doesn't know is that Lev has kept a single diamond bracelet, which he now hides in the inside pocket of his not-so-white jacket. Lev finds them a place to sleep that night. It's the best they've had yet, a motel room. Finding it wasn't all that hard to do. He scouted out a rundown motel without many cars out front. Then it was just a matter of finding an unlocked bathroom window in an unoccupied room. As long as they kept the curtains drawn and the lights off, no one would know they were there. My genius keeps running off on you, Sci-Fi tells him. Sighs back to his old self, like the incident that morning never happened. Only it did happen, and they both know it. Outside, they hear a car door open. Lev and Sci prepare to bolt if a key turns in the motel room lock, but it's another door they hear opening, a few rooms away. Sci shakes out his tension, but Lev doesn't relax. Not yet. I want to know about today, Lev says. It's not a question, it's a request. Sci is unconcerned. Ancient history, he says. Leave the past in the past and live for the moment. That's wisdom you can take to the grave and dig it up when you need it. What if I dig it up right now? Lev takes a moment to let that sink in, then reaches into his pocket and pulls out a diamond bracelet. He holds it in front of him, making sure the streetlight spilling through a slit in the curtains catches the diamonds so they glisten. Where'd you get that? Sci-Fi's voice has lost all the playfulness it had only a second ago. I kept it, Lev says calmly. I thought it might come in handy. I told you to get rid of it. It wasn't yours to get rid of. After all, you said it yourself. You didn't steal this. Lev twists the bracelet so a diamond refracts a sparkle of light right into Sci-Fi's eye. Without the room lights on, Lev can't see much, but he swears he can see Sci-Fi's cheeks start to twitch. Sci stands up, looming over Lev. Lev stands as well, a full head shorter than Sci-Fi. You take that out of my face, says Sci-Fi, or I swear I'm going to pound you into pork rinds. Lev thinks he might actually do it, too. Sci-Fi clenches his fists, and with bandages, he looks like a boxer, hands wrapped before putting on the gloves. Still, Lev doesn't back down. He just dangles the bracelet. It sends the twinkling lights flitting around the room like a lazy disco ball. I'll put it away if you tell me why this bracelet and all those other things wound up in your pockets. Put it away first, and then I'll tell you. Fair enough. Lev slips the bracelet back into his pocket and waits, but Sci-Fi isn't talking, so Lev gives him a little prompt. What's his name? Lev asks. Or is it a she? Sci-Fi's shoulders slump in defeat. He crumples into a chair. Lev can't see his face at all now in the darkness, so Lev listens closely to his voice. As long as it still sounds like Sai's voice, he knows that Sai's okay. Lev sits himself on the edge of the bed a few feet away from Sai and listens. It's a he says. I don't know his name. He must have kept his name in another part of his brain. All I got was his right temporal lobe. That's only 1/8 of the cerebral cortex, so I'm 7/8 me and 1/8 him. I figured that was it. Lev had realized what was going on with Sai even before he stole the bandages from the pharmacy. Sai gave him the clue himself. Do it before he changes my mind, Sai had said. So, he was a shoplifter? He had problems. I guess those problems are why his parents had him unwound in the first place. And now one of his problems is mine. Wow, that sucks. Sci-Fi laughs bitterly at that. Yeah, Fry, it does. It's kind of like what happened to my brother Ray, says Lev. He went to this government auction thing, ended up with 10 acres on a lake, and it cost next to nothing. Then he finds out that the land came with a bunker full of toxic chemicals seeping into the ground. Now he owned it, so now it was his problem. Cost him almost 10 times the cost of the land to clean up the chemicals. Sucker, says Sai. Yeah, but then those chemicals weren't in his brain. Sai looks down for a moment. He's not a bad kid. He's just hurting real bad. The way Sai's talking, it's like the kid is still there, right there in the room with them. He's got this urge about him to grab things, like an addiction, you know? Shiny things, mostly. It's not like he really wants them. It's like he just kind of needs to snap them up. I figure he's a kleptomaniac. That means, hell, you know what it means. So he talks to you? Nah, not really. I don't get the part of him that uses words. I get feelings, mostly. Sometimes images, but usually just feelings. Urges. When I get an urge and I don't know where it's coming from, I know it's from him. Like the time I saw this Irish setter on the street and I wanted to go over and pet it. I'm not a dog person, see, but all of a sudden I just had to pet the pooch. Now that Sai's talking about it, he can't stop. It's all spilling out like water over a dam. Petting that dog was one thing, but the stealing is another. The stealing makes me mad. I mean, here I am, a law-abiding citizen, never took nothing that didn't belong to me in my whole life, and now I'm stuck with this. There's people out there, like that lady in the Christmas store. They see a number kid like me, and they automatically assume I'm up to no good. And now, thanks to this kid in my head, they're right. And you want to know what's funny? This kid was Lily Sienna like you. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Hearing that surprises Lev. Not the description, but the fact that Sai can describe him at all. You know what he looked like? Sai nods. I can see him sometimes. It's hard, but sometimes I can. I close my eyes and imagine looking into a mirror. Usually I see myself reflected, but once in a while I see him. It's only for an instant. Kind of like trying to catch a bolt of lightning after you already seen the flash. But the other people, they don't see him when he steals. It's me they see. My hands grabbing. The people who matter know it's not you, your dads. They don't even know about this, Sai says. They think they did me a favor sticking me with this brain chunk. If I told them about it, they'd feel guilty till the end of time, so I can't tell them. Lev doesn't know what to say. He wishes he'd never brought it up. He wishes he hadn't insisted on knowing. But most of all, he wishes Sai didn't have to deal with this. He's a good guy. He deserves a better break. And this kid, he doesn't even understand he's a part of me, Sai says. It's like those ghosts that don't know they're dead. He keeps trying to be him and can't understand why the rest of him ain't there. All of a sudden, Lev realizes something. He lived in Joplin, didn't he? Sai doesn't answer for a long time. That's how Lev knows it's true. Finally, Sai says, There are things he's still got locked up in my brain that I can't get at. All I know is that he's got to get to Joplin, so I got to get there too. Once we're there, maybe he'll leave me alone. Sci-Fi shifts his shoulders, not in a shrug, but in an uncomfortable roll, like when you get an itch in your back or a sudden shiver. I don't want to talk about him no more. His 1/8 feels a whole lot bigger when I spend time hanging around in his gray matter. Lev wants to put his arm around Cy's shoulder like an older brother to comfort him, but he just can't bring himself to do it. So instead, he pulls the blanket from the bed and wraps it around Cy as he sits in the chair. What's all this about? Just making sure you two stay warm. Then he says, Don't worry about anything. I've got it all under control. Sci-Fi laughs. You can't even take care of yourself, and now you think you could take care of me? If it weren't for me, you'd still be chowing down on other folks' garbage back at the mall. That's right, but you helped me. Now it's my turn to do the same for you. And I'm going to get you to Joplin.